Morning, we are joined by Dr. Will Delahanty. He's a political science professor from Missouri Southern State University, and if you're in need of answers this morning, he's one of the people that might be able to provide some until we firmly know what's happening in this presidential race and, frankly, just what's happening around the country. So thank you for joining us.
I appreciate it.
I want to zero in on some voting behavior because that's one of your specialties in maybe what we've seen in the 4 states, right? All 4 states from a presidential standpoint are red at the moment.
Correct, yes.
But what could we possibly identify in the 4-state area that could be indicative of what's happening around the country?
Sure. Let's see, would you rather start in, let's say, Kansas or in Missouri?
Let's do Kansas.
Okay. If you look kind of in Kansas itself, so as you suggested, I mean, at the level of the presidential election, it's not surprising that Kansas is red, right? That is for President Trump. That's something that's kind of historically consistent.
But we've got specks of blue here.
We do. And so interestingly enough, you've got kind of urban areas around like the Kansas City metro area, Topeka. You also have, let's see, I believe Douglas County, which is also kind of the home of my alma mater, which is the University of Kansas.
Okay.
And so I think what you're seeing here is kind of, I mean, as we were discussing before we went on air, the effect of kind of suburban or urban, right, populations who tend to be in some ways socially liberal, but nevertheless also potentially fiscally conservative. And so I think you see some of these actually also replicated in Missouri if you were to go across the state line, where you have population centers, urban or otherwise, that tend to be kind of islands, if you will, of Democratic support in what would be otherwise, right, kind of very large red state for President Trump.
Right. Well, Johnson County was one you and I were talking about, and the numbers show that President Trump won that in 2016 by I think +2 or +3. Joe Biden winning Johnson County this time around. So that might, you're saying that might be an indicator of what those types of areas would look like around the country.
Right, exactly. I mean, if you were to look at other states, Ohio, for example, as another kind of indicator here, you would see something similar. So, I mean, you're seeing, right, these kind of blue islands around what we would consider to be urban areas where we would expect, right, to have more Democratic support.
Right.
The other thing that's also interesting is that you have population centers there that also kind of affect statewide races. So you could have a state that is, for the purposes of the presidency, Republican, but nevertheless at the level of the state have democratically elected public officials, et cetera. So looking at kind of within states and looking at population centers really helps to kind of explain, I think, at the level of the state, right, differences in what you'd see at the level of the presidency.
Is there anything else that you see within the 4 states? I mean, you point out northeast Kansas.
Yeah, you might want to also look at Missouri.
Yeah. There we go.
So, I mean, the thing that's kind of interesting for purposes of the presidency, right? I mean, Missouri, of course, is solidly in favor of President Trump. But then again, right, you see these little islands of Democratic support, right, in St. Louis, Columbia, right, which is kind of the home of the University of Missouri, and then you've got Kansas City, Missouri, right, the metro area. So. Again, I mean, you also see an urban-rural divide, right, within states, which I think is something that's really kind of interesting. I mean, you look at states generally in the presidential election, and you think of them as kind of homogenous blobs in the sense of having electoral college votes, but they're actually kind of more diverse internally.
Well, we'll continue this conversation with you because I think there's a lot that we're looking at. Of course, there are states that are still undetermined, and they are going to play a key role in figuring out who the next president of the United States is. So we will continue our conversation with Dr. Delahanty, and we'll be right back on the KOA Morning News after this.